At 78, Sally Field's heartbreaking story shocks fans. Picture this. You're 45,000 feet above the earth when the aircraft starts to shake. Not the gentle turbulence you've grown accustomed to. This is different. Violent. The oxygen masks drop. Around you, passengers grip their armrests with white knuckles, some praying, others weeping. And in seat 12, sits Sally Field, two-time Academy Award winner, beloved actress, mother of 3, staring death in the face and thinking not about her awards or her fame, but about whether she's lived a life worth remembering. What would you think about in those moments? What would matter most? This is where our story begins. Not at the beginning, but at a crossroads between life and death, where every choice, every struggle, every triumph suddenly crystallizes into perfect clarity. But to understand how Sally Field arrived at that terrifying moment in 2000, we need to travel back through time, through the shadows and light that shaped one of America's most enduring performers. Because Sally's story isn't just about acting, it's about survival, transformation, and the relentless pursuit of authenticity in a world that often demands we wear masks. Shadows in childhood. The California sun blazed mercilessly over Pasadena in 1952, but inside the Field household, darkness crept through every corner like smoke under a door. 6-year-old Sally pressed her small body against her bedroom wall, listening to the sounds downstairs, her mother's muffled sobs, her stepfather's heavy footsteps, the awful silence that followed his rage. Jock Mahoney wasn't just any stepfather. He was a Hollywood stuntman, ruggedly handsome, physically imposing, the kind of man who looked like a hero on screen but cast long, threatening shadows at home. When he drank, which was often, those shadows grew darker. Children learn to read the room before they can read books, Sally would later reflect. And what Sally read in those rooms was danger. Her stepfather's moods shifted like California weather, sunny one moment, stormy the next. She learned to make herself invisible, to duck her head when he passed, to speak only when spoken to. But here's what's remarkable about children. Even in the darkest soil, something inside them reaches toward light. For Sally, that light was performance. When the household tensions became unbearable, she would retreat to her room and become someone else entirely. A princess, a teacher, a brave explorer. In those moments of imagination, she wasn't the frightened little girl walking on eggshells. She was powerful. She was free. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to carry an invisible weight? How their smiles don't quite reach their eyes? That was Sally Field at 8, 9, 10 years old. A child learning to split herself in two, developing what psychologists call hypervigilance, constantly scanning for threats, always ready to adapt, to please, to disappear. The abuse wasn't just emotional. Jock's hands wandered where they shouldn't. His words cut deeper than any physical blow. And Sally's mother, Margaret, caught in her own web of fear and dependency, couldn't, or wouldn't, protect her daughter. I became a master of compartmentalization, Sally would later say. I learned to lock away parts of myself, to only show what people wanted to see. But even locked away, those parts of her were growing stronger. Every time she escaped into a character, every time she made her friends laugh with an impression, every time she lost herself in a school play, she was unknowingly building the foundation for something extraordinary. The Flying Nun takes flight. Flash forward to 1965. Picture a young woman, barely 20, with honey-colored hair and expressive eyes that seem to hold secrets, standing outside the ABC television center in Hollywood. Her palms are sweaty. Her heart is racing. She's about to audition for a role that will change everything. But let's pause here for a moment. How did that frightened little girl from Pasadena transform into this determined young actress? The answer lies in the spaces between, in drama classes at Birmingham High School, in small theater productions, in the quiet moments when she realized that becoming someone else wasn't just escape anymore. It was power. Gidget came first, a bubbly teenage surfer girl that seemed like perfect casting for the wholesome-looking Sally. But here's what the audience didn't see: the meticulous preparation, the way she studied every gesture, every inflection. Even in what seemed like lightweight television, Sally was developing her craft with the intensity of a method actor. Then came the flying nun, Sister Burt Reynolds, with her aerodynamic cornet and innocent smile, soaring through the Puerto Rican sky. To many, it seemed like career suicide, a serious actress trapped in a fantasy sitcom. The critics were merciless. Hollywood insiders whispered that she'd never be taken seriously again. But what if I told you that playing a flying nun was actually Sally's first masterclass in finding truth within the absurd? Think about it. How do you make a woman who flies believable? How do you ground the fantastical in genuine human emotion? Sally approached Sister Burt Reynolds the same way she would later approach Mary Todd Lincoln, by finding the woman inside the role. She discovered that beneath the habit was a young woman grappling with faith, purpose, and belonging. Sound familiar? I learned that audiences can forgive anything except dishonesty, she would later explain. Even when I was literally flying through the air, I had to make people believe in the person beneath the wings. The show ran for 3 seasons, and while it made Sally famous, it also made her feel trapped. Imagine being known worldwide for something that doesn't represent who you truly are. Imagine having your face on lunchboxes while your soul is crying out for something deeper, more meaningful. But here's the beautiful irony. Playing a character who could fly was teaching Sally how to soar. She was learning discipline, timing, the subtle art of physical comedy. She was also learning something else: how to handle success, criticism, and the peculiar loneliness that comes with fame. Breaking free from heaven. The early 1970s found Sally at a crossroads. The flying nun had ended, leaving her typecast and seemingly unemployable for serious roles. Directors saw Sister Burt Reynolds when they looked at her. Casting agents offered her more sitcom roles, more smiling, more flying, more forgettable entertainment. But Sally Field had tasted something during those years of television success, and it wasn't enough. She wanted to act, really act. She wanted to disappear so completely into a character that audiences forgot they were watching Sally Field at all. This is where many careers die, in the space between what you're known for and what you're capable of. How do you reinvent yourself when the world has already decided who you are? Sally's answer was radical. She enrolled in acting classes with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. Picture this: a television actress famous for flying sitting alongside serious theater actors, learning the method, stripping away pretense, digging into emotional truth. "I had to unlearn everything," she recalled. "I had to stop trying to be likable and start trying to be real. The method is brutal. It demands that actors access their own pain, their own joy, their own darkest memories to create authentic performances." For Sally, this meant confronting those childhood demons she'd spent years burying. It meant facing the scared little girl who learned to please everyone and never trust anyone completely. But something magical happened in those classes. All that compartmentalization, all that hypervigilance, all those years of reading rooms and adapting to survive. Suddenly, these weren't just survival mechanisms. They were acting tools. "My pain became my palette," she would later say. "Everything I'd suffered, everything I'd survived, it all became material." The breakthrough came in 1976 with Sybil, the television movie about a woman with multiple personality disorder. When Sally read the script, she recognized something familiar: the fragmentation, the need to become different people to survive. Here was a role that required everything she'd learned about transformation, about hiding, about splitting yourself to endure the unendurable. The performance was a revelation. Critics who had dismissed her as a lightweight television actress suddenly saw an artist of extraordinary depth. Sally didn't just play Sybil. She embodied 16 different personalities, each with distinct voices, mannerisms, and emotional landscapes. Watching Sybil today, it's impossible to see Sister Bertrille. There's only this brave woman diving headfirst into psychological chaos, emerging with something true and devastating and beautiful. Norma Ray and the Birth of a Voice. 1979. A textile mill in Alabama. The air is thick with cotton dust and decades of worker resignation. The noise is deafening. Machines thundering, workers shouting over the din to communicate. And in the middle of it all stands Sally Field as Norma Ray Webster, a factory worker about to find her voice. But let's talk about what happened before the cameras rolled. Sally didn't just show up and play Norma Ray, she became her. She spent weeks in real textile mills, her hands growing rough from the work, her back aching from the long hours. She listened to workers' stories, absorbed their frustrations, their hopes, their bone-deep exhaustion. I realized that Norma Ray wasn't so different from me, Sally reflected. She was a woman who had been silenced, who had learned to accept less than she deserved. But she was also someone who discovered she had power she never knew existed. The famous scene, you know the one, where Norma Ray stands on a table in the factory, holding up a sign that simply says, Union, waiting as the machines slowly, one by one, fall silent. It's become iconic, studied in film schools, celebrated in labor history books. But in that moment, Sally wasn't just playing a character fighting for workers' rights. She was a woman who had spent her entire life making herself smaller, finally discovering what it felt like to take up space. The performance earned Sally her first Academy Award. But more than that, it announced the arrival of a new kind of actress, one who could blend accessibility with fierce intelligence, vulnerability with strength. Do you remember watching that scene for the first time? Do you remember the chills running down your spine as the factory fell silent? That wasn't just good acting. That was transformation. That was a woman finding her voice and using it to lift others. But here's what the award speeches didn't capture: the cost of such complete transformation. To become Norma Ray, Sally had to access parts of herself she'd kept hidden. The anger at being underestimated, the frustration at being dismissed, the deep well of empathy for anyone who'd ever felt powerless, love in the time of stardom. Success changes everything, including love. By the early 1980s, Sally Field was no longer the flying nun or even just the serious actress who'd surprised everyone with Norma Ray. She was a force, an artist at the height of her powers, a woman who could choose her projects and command respect in Hollywood. And then she met Burt Reynolds. Picture the most famous movie star in the world, charming, magnetic, with that trademark mustache and megawatt smile. Burt was at the pinnacle of his career, the kind of larger-than-life personality who filled every room he entered. When he pursued Sally, it felt like being chosen by royalty. But what happens when two people at the top of their respective games try to build something real together? What happens when the cameras stop rolling and you're just two people trying to navigate love, ego, and the peculiar pressures of extreme fame? Their relationship was passionate, public, and ultimately painful. Burt was old Hollywood, smooth, controlling, used to being the center of attention. Sally was new Hollywood, earnest, collaborative, committed to the craft above all else. On screen together in Smokey and the Bandit and Hooper, their chemistry was undeniable. Off screen, they were often at odds. "I kept trying to be the woman he wanted," Sally would later admit, "but that woman wasn't me. I was disappearing again, just like I had as a child." The relationship ended, but not before it taught Sally something crucial about love: that losing yourself in someone else isn't romance, it's regression. She had worked too hard to find her voice to let anyone silence it again. But love would find her again, in a different form. Enter Alan Greisman, a producer who appreciated Sally's intelligence as much as her beauty, who saw her ambition as an asset rather than a threat. Their relationship was quieter, steadier, the kind of love that grows rather than burns. With Alan, Sally discovered something she'd never experienced before: partnership. Someone who supported her career rather than competing with it. Someone who saw her complexity as a gift rather than a problem to be solved. Places in the heart. Places in history. 1984. Places in the heart. Sally as Edna Spaulding, a Depression-era widow fighting to save her farm and provide for her children. Another transformation. Another dive into the deep end of human experience. But this time was different. This time, Sally wasn't just drawing on her own pain. She was tapping into something larger, something generational. Edna Spaulding was every woman who had ever been left alone to figure it out. Every mother who had ever had to be stronger than she felt. Every human being who had ever faced impossible odds with nothing but determination and love. The Oscar speech that followed, "I can't deny the fact that you like me right now, you like me," became instantly famous, endlessly quoted, and often mocked. But listen to it again. Really listen. What you'll hear isn't ego or desperation. What you'll hear is a woman who spent her childhood believing she was fundamentally unlikable, finally receiving proof that she was wrong. People turned that speech into a punchline, Sally reflected years later. But for me, it was the moment I finally believed I belonged. The courage to speak. The 1990s brought new challenges and new opportunities for growth. Sally's career continued to flourish with memorable roles in Steel Magnolias and Mrs. Doubtfire. But something else was happening beneath the surface. She was finding her voice not just as an actress, but as an advocate. The cause closest to her heart was women's rights, specifically reproductive freedom. Having lived through the era when such choices were illegal and dangerous, Sally understood viscerally what was at stake. She began speaking publicly, lending her voice to organizations fighting for women's autonomy. "I realized that my platform came with responsibility," she explained. "If I could use my visibility to help other women, how could I stay silent?" But advocacy work is different from acting. On screen, you can hide behind characters. In the political arena, you're completely exposed. Every word is scrutinized. Every position is dissected. Sally discovered that speaking truth to power requires its own kind of courage. She faced backlash, of course. Conservative groups criticized her positions. Some fans felt betrayed that their beloved actress had become political. But Sally had learned something valuable over the years. The cost of silence is always higher than the cost of speaking up. When the sky falls. Now we return to that plane, spiraling through dark clouds above the Rocky Mountains. The year was 2000, and Sally Field, actress, mother, advocate, was facing the very real possibility that her story might end right there, 45,000 feet above Colorado. In those moments, she would later recall, everything became crystal clear. Every petty worry, every career anxiety, every grudge I was holding, none of it mattered. What mattered was whether I had loved enough, whether I had been brave enough, whether I had used my life for something meaningful. The plane didn't crash. Through skill, luck, and perhaps divine intervention, the pilots managed to regain control and make an emergency landing. Sally walked away physically unharmed but spiritually transformed. "I realized I had been given a second chance," she said, "not just to live, but to live fully, without fear, without apology." The later chapters, the years that followed, were marked by a different kind of fearlessness. Sally took on challenging television roles like ER and Brothers and Sisters, proving that age hadn't diminished her abilities, it had refined them. She continued her advocacy work with renewed passion, speaking out on issues ranging from LGBT rights to environmental protection. In 2012, she portrayed Mary Todd Lincoln in Lincoln, bringing depth and humanity to one of history's most misunderstood first ladies. The performance was widely praised, earning her an Emmy nomination and reminding everyone that Sally Field's greatest gift had always been her ability to find the universal human truth within any character. But perhaps her most important performance during this period was simply being herself, authentically, unapologetically, completely. The unbreakable spirit. Today, Sally Field stands as more than just an accomplished actress. She is a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of authenticity, and the courage required to keep growing throughout a lifetime. From the frightened child walking on eggshells to the flying nun soaring through fantasy to the method actor diving deep into truth to the advocate speaking up for the voiceless, every chapter of Sally's story has been about transformation. Not the superficial kind that changes clothes or hairstyles, but the profound kind that changes souls. What can we learn from Sally Field's journey? What wisdom can we extract from her decades of survival and success? First, that our pain doesn't have to define us, but it can inform us. Sally took her childhood trauma and transformed it into empathy, understanding, and artistic power. She didn't let her wounds become excuses. She made them into instruments of healing both for herself and others. Second, that authenticity is not a destination, but a daily choice. In an industry built on artifice, Sally fought constantly to remain real. She chose truth over comfort, growth over safety, integrity over easy success. Third, that it's never too late to find your voice. Sally's advocacy work didn't begin until she was well into middle age, proving that our most important contributions might come not in our youth but in our wisdom years. And finally, that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about breaking and healing over and over again until you discover that the cracks are where the light gets in. Sally Field once said, "I think the thing I'm most proud of is not any role I've played or any award I've won, but the fact that I never gave up. I kept showing up, even when it was hard, even when I was afraid, even when I wasn't sure I belonged." In a world that often rewards the loudest voices, Sally Field proved that quiet strength can be just as powerful. In an industry that discards women as they age, she demonstrated that experience is invaluable. In a society that prefers simple narratives, she embraced complexity. She took flight as a nun, found her voice as Norma Ray, discovered her heart in Places in the Heart, and finally found her peace in simply being Sally Field, flawed, fierce, and utterly, completely human. As our story draws to a close, remember that Sally Field's greatest performance has been her life itself, a masterclass in resilience, growth, and the endless possibility of transformation. She reminds us that we are all capable of rewriting our stories, of becoming more than our circumstances would suggest, of finding light even in the deepest darkness. The little girl who learned to make herself invisible grew up to become impossible to ignore. The actress who started by escaping into other people ended up discovering herself. The woman who once believed she was fundamentally unlikable became beloved by millions. And that plane that nearly fell from the sky? It carried her safely home to continue a story that's still being written, one chapter, one choice, one brave moment at a time. What will you do with your second chances? How will you use your voice? What transformation awaits you? The sky, after all, is not the limit. It's just the beginning. See you on the next video.